Yay, it's being recorded. Okay, so let me get it together over here on live on Facebook. Um, Hold on, bear with me. It
No
is,
problem.
I don't know, Zoom makes so many changes. I can never figure out what's what. Um, Share to my page. You told people that it's on the Campy page too, right? It's okay because
Yeah.
Cindy can share it or somebody can share it while we're here. Okay, we're about to go live on the Facebook. I can't tell. Ask her to tell me if it's live on Facebook on the Campy page.
You want to go check it out real quick? Okay,
All
she's
right, ladies and
ready to
gentlemen.
grab the phone.
Thank you so much, everybody, that joined us. We're going to get started in about 1 minute, about 60 seconds, and we're going to get started.
Hey, Kate. Okay, yeah, we do have a live feed on that one, so.
Perfect. Okay, we'll get started in about 30 seconds. I just wanted to make sure it was up so people could log on if that's what they, if they got here early.
Now, Kate, since you made it, I may call you out during the course of the presentation, so don't get embarrassed.
I'm having some issue volume. I hope that.
I see. Yeah, you're going in and out on the mute there.
All right. So, well, again, I do want to welcome everybody today who has joined us to talk about William Brower's new book series. It's a whole series, lots and lots for you to read, lots and lots to keep you entertained. And even some of you folks who have forgotten how much you loved reading, I think you'll learn to love it all over again when you read this book. So, a little bit about our featured author today, William Brower. Now, William, if you don't know, he's a Titanic historian, and he's got lots and lots and lots, and I do mean lots, of information out in the atmosphere about the Titanic. Lots of stuff I've, little known facts and things like that, and just really took a deep dive into the history of the Titanic and brought it to life in a meaningful way in his work on the subject. But he's always had a passion for history, since he was young. History and mythology, okay? And you'll see some of that mythology play out in this series I'm going to tell you about in just a little bit. So I would tell you that he weaves some elements of the past into like these really fantastic new worlds full of excitement and adventure, right? And so just like a lot of the writers that we interact with, he's been writing, since he was a little guy, since he was, a wee bitty thing in high school and even before high school, actually. And he actually kind of kicked off his career by winning a Halloween writing contest when he was younger. And then by the time he got to high school, he had kind of expanded the things that he was writing about. So as he got a little older, he was able to travel through Florida and some parts of New York. And guess what he got to do? He got to interview members of the Titanic community, right? And then he just kept expanding that research, and especially his research on the ship, right? And so around 1995, he started looking to expand his brand just a little bit. And guess what happened at that time? That's when director James Cameron made a public announcement about his next feature film called what? The Titanic. The Titanic. So you know, that's led to a lot more interest in the Titanic and really helped expand William's writings. Okay, so as the world became swept up in the Titanic mania, if you will, right? William had a traveling series, okay, and it was called Titanic: The Legacy Remains. And it toured all throughout Florida, and it won lots of accolades and admirations on all sorts of levels, okay? And at, you know, at the start of the 2000s, William closed out the year at the local Performing Arts Center, where an audience of, get this, 10,000 fans. 10,000 fans. They all joined him on the decks of the Titanic one last time before he closed out that show. So William is definitely not one for staying idle. Nope, not at all. And so right about that time, that's when he did his first draft, his first full draft, based off of the practical jokes and life lessons learned from his close circle of friends who motivated and encouraged his creative endeavors. And then he's had lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of other things he's written about since then, right? Lots of things he's written about since then. But we are super excited to share his most recent release. Okay, William has crafted an excellent, super exciting, fantastic fantasy series of books, right? There's 5 books in the series, and the first one is The Legend of Graham HAUTECLERE, that will be available this coming Friday. And William will have the link. It'll be on the KMP page, and it'll be everywhere. So you look for that this coming Friday on September the 3rd. We will get to launch it, and you can have it in your hands because it's an excellent story. It is a great, great story. Like, you see this guy, this dragon guy behind me? Just think of taking a deep dive into that dragon's world and just really immersing yourself in legend and, and story. So I think some of those are the best kind of stories, the ones that are steeped in legend and steeped in history. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our author, William Brower, and he's going to give us a little backstory and even read us a tidbit of his novel. So William, the floor is yours.
Well, definitely. Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everybody, for all who have been able to make it. So, yeah, this story is very, very close to my heart on so many levels, and right off the bat, I automatically say that for those that, especially those that are the aspiring writers, that this is actually the best primary physical example of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, because for starters, before even putting Graham HAUTECLERE together in the first place, we have to go backwards in a matter of speaking, back to my upbringing. And so, growing up, I was raised with a passion for history, the importance of learning family history, and also the appreciation of mythology and literature. And so it was things such as spending time with my dad whenever he was home, because he used to work for Eastern Airlines. He would actually share some of the family relics, such as swords that were collected over the years and things along those lines. And his logic in showing them and stuff were always that you're going to have to learn how these were used, how these are handled. That way then you're going to take care of these one day, and you need to know how to do this properly. And in terms of the history side as well too, that's when I was first learned that our family goes to the direct lineage of William the Conqueror. So I'm happy to say I do have the determination of a Viking, that runs through me at times, and I do sometimes get stubborn as well too because of it. And it's it's things like that helped in creating some of the basis of it. And then on top of that, it was the times spent between my great uncle and both of my grandparents' sides. Obviously, my paternal grandfather was the one that I would spend summers with, who had taught me everything about the Titanic. And while my mother's father, whom I would call granddad, he would spend the times introducing the grandkids to not only the Universal movie monsters, but he would also share some of his stories from World War II. And in his case, he always told about the fact that he came into the war because of the fact that three of his buddies had all enlisted with him, and he got sick, so he was held back at the time. But they ended up being stationed on board the Arizona. And then when news came that the Arizona was sunk during the attack in Pearl Harbor, he vowed revenge against the Japanese. And so he ended up going to the Pacific campaign, where he was sent to Guadalcanal. And, he was actually earned the nickname of Trigger Happy Harry during the course of his time there, because at one point he was an anti-aircraft gunner, and he was actually defending against an oncoming kamikaze. And as he had put it, he actually had shifted his gun so hard and so fast that he actually broke the restraining bolt. So he actually pivoted to almost a full 360, accidentally blew up his own ship's smokestack instead. With my great uncle, however, my Uncle Johnny on my dad's side, he used to come down during the course of the winters. And he used to talk about his experiences more on the European campaign. He had taken part in D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge and things like that, but he always approached it more from a very, very reserved perspective. So I never really knew too much about his full experience until after he had passed away, and he had sent me all of his papers and his battle records and things along those lines. And so, growing up between the two of them and watching their, just how they approached the subject, always helped in putting together ideas for characters. So understandably, we fast forward to me coming into high school, and ironically enough, it's actually 30 years since the very first story of the series was first written, and I was sitting inside of my earth science class in high school, and I was getting bored with the lecture, so I started putting together some ideas for outlines on stories and things like that. And just to see how Campbell's formula falls into play, as luck would have it, just to my caddy corner diagonal from me was a gentleman named Rodrigo Negrera. And he too was getting bored with the lecture. So he was sitting there and he was drawing zombies and skulls and things like that. So I tilted my desk and, kind of whispered in his ear and asked if he knew how to draw a minotaur. And, he just kind of looked at me a minute and, just kind of threw his pen together and threw something, within about 5 minutes, I had a nice little image to work off of. So, I sat there and I started writing what would be the first 2 pages for the story itself. And right off the bat, I was wanting to do something completely different compared to what you normally would see with typical fantasy writers and such. So in this case, the world of Mysidia actually, has been a world that's been divided upon itself. It's united in the same religion and the same concept of having a chosen one. However, the only difference is that there's been a 10,000-year civil war. And so the only resolution that they had come up with is to build walls around each individual kingdom. And if you were to step across or go past the barrier, then that would be seen as an act of aggression. So I started drafting the first 2 pages, and by the time I got into the afternoon class, my English teacher had noticed that I wasn't paying attention to the lecture. There's a running formula here. And fortunately for her, she made me the offer of a lifetime. And she said that if I were to incorporate the daily lesson into whatever it was that I was working on, I can work on the story instead of just working out of the textbook. And so I jumped at that opportunity in a heartbeat. So from there, I was able to start to build everything the rest of the way. So this is where we started to see not only the creation of the characters themselves, but also more of the world. So on the character front, going back to both my grandfather and my great uncle, for starters, we had, my one character named Caravax. And Caravax physically looks exactly like Horus from Greek mythology. And he is the king of the Hawkmen. And even though, he's very, very battle hardened and everything else, he's extremely reserved and relies more on tactics and strategy than type of move. The flip side of the coin, directly underneath his kingdom, is one that is known as the Land Dwellers. And this is where I kind of incorporated other aspects of the Egyptian gods. And so it's run and ruled by a gentleman named Letarian, who physically looks like Anubis. So it's the head of a black jackal on a human body. And Letarian is actually the embodiment of my grandfather's attitude, of Trigger Happy Harry, and his reaction, between his vengeance and his vows and everything else. So Letarian is extremely aggressive, and he doesn't believe in relying on tactics or anything like that. He'll strike first. He'll charge right into the heart of battle, and he doesn't care what's going on in the first place as long as somebody gets taken down. Now, lo and behold, this little short story project blew up upon itself even further. My English teacher shared it with the creative writing teacher. And so the creative writing teacher invited me to share it within the school's literary magazine. So I was like, that's a huge honor. So yes, I'll be happy to. And, but I told her, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I would like my friends' drawings to go with it because, it's because of those visual aid that this story was written. And it's not just me. And so the drawings were included. And it came into a double-edged sword because during the course of my 4 years of high school, because of my story, starting with 9th grade and the first few pages of it, this turned into what would become a monthly visit of me with the school. Unfortunately, a lot of my descriptions were too vivid, and obviously the battle scenes were, it was based on, it was very, very prolific. It was about as accurate as you could get without using modern technology. And so, and then on top of that, on any research that I would incorporate into the story, I turned around and would always check it out of the school library. So right off the bat, my immediate defense, while sitting down with the friendly doctor, was, well, if you don't want us reading this, why is it sitting up there in the first place? And if you're worried about us being affected by it, how come it's in the textbook? And so, he was like, okay, well, that's fair enough. I just want to make sure that everything's okay. And I'm like, well, yeah, everything's fine. This is just me demonstrating a story, and it's kind of incorporating elements of history that have always been a fascinating point for me. And that's it. He's like, oh, okay, no problem. So we fast forward about a month after the publication and after the first visit, and the next thing I know, the story started to take a life upon itself. My one friend, Paul, loved the images, loved the descriptions on some of the characters, that he actually went over and had his garage band develop a soundtrack, even though it was only 3-page story at the time. And they would actually go throughout our hometown, and even into Fort Lauderdale and stuff, go to some of the clubs, and they would start performing it. And they would say, "This is an upcoming story by our friend William. You have to check it out. Remember his name. It's the next Stephen King." Things like that. And next thing I know, more and more people were actually starting to pay attention to it, and it even got to a point where, even outside of the circle of friends, I had other classmates that were appreciating it. I had one gentleman who was a few years older than me, who was about to graduate, and he sent me a picture where he had taken one of the characters and actually had it detailed on the hood of his race car that he was going to be racing at our local raceway down in Miami. And I was like, that's amazing. I mean, that's we'll look underneath the fine print, and it says inspired by a story written by William Brower. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's fantastic. And so even with some of these characters and such, and even with that type of impact, it was always fun to see the reactions from it. And once you remove a lot of the elements, the history and stuff, you're gonna actually you actually do see the truth behind the magic. The infamous Wizard of Oz trick. So right off the bat, the lead character of the story is a gentleman named Philip, and Philip is actually not a warrior. He is more of a magistrate. He works more off of diplomacy than war tactics. And in the beginning, what happens is that his village is attacked and raided. His family is massacred in the course of the process. He ends up being framed for the massacre and is banished. But in the midst of attempting suicide, he's saved at the last minute by a stranger dressed in a red robe. And the stranger directs him to some nomadic traders down the road. And that's kind of where everything starts to branch out into the bigger picture. Ironically enough, since Michelle has the red dragon up, I can share the religious aspect of the story, which is where everything kind of falls into the red robe stranger there. The religion within Mysidia is actually written by a god known as Cronius. And Cronius is, if you take off and modify his name, you actually have the real name, which is Cronus from Greek mythology of the Titans. But instead of the Greek version, this is more of the standard European one. And so Cronius believes in unity, peaceful world, a world of open knowledge and everything else to that effect. And so what he did was he actually had given birth to his children, which were the dragons. And the dragons were the mediators between his will and the people that lived in the world. And so the elder dragon is known as Clarok. He's a red dragon. And he was the one during the course of teaching the humans how to develop a civilization, how to establish a society, and everything else of that integral factor. He had a vision one night that everything that they were teaching to these people was going to be used against them. They were going to learn also warfare. They were going to learn how to want for nothing and everything else to that effect. But in the darkest hour of the world, there would be a person who was going to unite them. And so Claroc ordered his children to actually craft Graham HAUTECLERE, to have something in readiness for the chosen one. And so, admittedly, being an 80s kid and a fan of anime, and even now, I still have the statue sitting right next to my desk. It's a giant paperweight these days, but I've always liked the idea and the concept for the TV series Voltron, and of coming together as one. And so in this case, what I did was I borrowed the armor from all the different world mythologies. So, Graham HAUTECLERE consists of a helmet that was crafted by the dragon elder Claroc himself that gives the wearer the senses of a dragon. So he's able to see for miles. He has extended hearing and things along those lines. Pull the curtain back, however, and you're actually looking at the helmet given to Perseus to ready himself for his fight against Medusa. The breastplate itself actually has a set of wings, not so he's able to fly, but if he's in a high altitude, he can at least glide in the wind. And, once again, pull it back and scratch off the surface, and you're going to see Icarus and then his wings as well too. So obviously the blade of Graham HAUTECLERE is inspired by Excalibur, but in this case it's my own take on it. And so in this case it was made by the dragons in the ice. So it's a crystal blade. The hilt that you would hold on to looks exactly like the head of a dragon. And then the final piece to it is the rest of the armor, which is scales, which gives him the ability to breathe underwater. And, again, that's because one of the other warlords happens to live at the bottom of the ocean. And that's the only one that is not inspired by Egyptian mythology, but is actually inspired by my favorite universal monster, the creature from the Black Lagoon. So we have a little bit of some pop culture and everything else mixed into religion on top of all those fun little hodgepodge. And so understandably, each of the original stories actually only lasted 10 pages at the time. But, at the point of coming in through, going into my junior year and my senior year, it ended up turning to its own little miniature office. So my buddies and I would take over the upstairs hallway by the library, and we had the illustrators on one side and the writer on the other side. And, we'd sit there and we'd brainstorm what could possibly look good or what could we achieve in 15 minutes before the bell rings. My personal favorite, which we still bring up, whenever we talk these days, the infamous quote of Jesus Christ, do you expect me to draw this when I'm putting together ideas for a battle scene that's too detailed for the time length? But even through all that point, everybody was still enraptured with the concept and with the story. And, it's one of those things where even by the time I finished it in the course of my senior year, what I originally thought was going to be the ending of it, I thought nothing of it after that. I was too busy looking towards the road ahead. So I just took the series, stapled it all together, and tossed it in my filing cabinet. So, lo and behold, though, after all my research with the Titanic and everything else, and, I put out my first book, we get to my 10-year reunion. And there I am. I'm walking in with my first book, and I'm like, I did it, guys. You were right. I'm a published author, and you know, going down the list and through all the mingling of everybody that was there, and they're all like, "That's great." We knew that was going to happen. No Stephen King. That's fine. No problem. Always next year. What happened to that fantasy series? Do you still have that fantasy series? What happened to that guy? And I was like, well, not much. It's sitting where I left it. And they're like, well, okay, are you going to do anything about it? Is there anything more that you're going to do with this? And I'm like, well, I mean, I never thought that much, but you know, okay, yeah, I'll work on it some more. That's fine. So I revisited it, and even in the course of revising and adding to it, I still maintained the same formula of holding on to a interest for both history, mythology, and things along those lines. But I even upgraded it slightly, though, which is where at one point I was actually kind of jokingly called Ray Jr. For Ray Harryhausen, because what I would do is I would actually stop off at random stores or even off at Toys R Us and stuff, and I'd pick up action figures such as this, and I would sit there and I would actually storyboard my chapter, and I'd build a whole scene based off of what it is that I'm about to write. So I had something that I can interpret visually while putting it together. And next thing I know, the original 10-page story expanded on itself. So it was a very, very pleasant surprise, to say the least. And obviously, even as we all grew up, even the other guys that were involved were like, "Well, yeah, of course, I want to do more with that series. Here's more character drawings. Here's a great concept of what the land could look like." And next thing I know, my friend Paul came back in and he's like, "Hey, listen, here's a whole CD that we did of nothing but a full length soundtrack just for you." I'm like, "Wow." That's fantastic. And I was like, "So what are you doing with it?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, we're still playing all the clubs down here. Everyone loves it. What's going on? Do you have any release dates? What are your other plans for it and such?" So I mean, that's we actually were joking about it. We're like, "Yeah, of course. We listen to you guys. We all have Spaceball syndrome. You know, we're going to see action figures. We're going to see a blowtorch. We're going to see clothes. We're going to see everything." And yeah, of course, yeah, let's do that. No problem. So and in one sense, it was a lot of foreshadowing because the next thing I know, Paul was like, "All kidding aside, you should look more into that. This story does have more to it than what you wrote." And so I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, why don't you put down a list of actors that you think would look good if given an opportunity?" And here we are years later. I still have these notes in my attaché case, and understandably, unfortunately, given the time difference between then and now, people's salaries have changed, and some have also passed on. But it's still always fun to look back and reminisce. Like I have like one of the notes says, for Philip, because he's very, very naive in one sense. I can see him in this, being portrayed by this one actor that was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. His name's Matthew McConaughey. I think he's coming out in that Dazed and Confused movie too. So we need to watch that film when it premieres and see if he could match the character. And one thing I'm very fortunate about, and I do want to acknowledge her because she's sitting there listening and reminiscing, is my dear friend Kate, who actually has been with me through the high school journey. And also has become an aspiring author amongst herself as well too. And so, it's fun to see, just the the apple never falling far from the tree, and just how the tables had turned after all these years. But yes, all kidding aside, though, these are things that have all been kept in the heart, and you know, one of the factors that I did do, during the course of my time and with this story running at full steam as much as it did, that I'm very very proud of is, I never forgot the fact that this was a team effort, and even though I wrote the story, it's because of the other guys and also the reactions of my friends and my classmates that have helped to keep me to continue pushing forward. So I actually met with the mayor of my hometown of Coral Springs, Florida, and I actually, we talked about recognizing the local authors and poets that live in the city. And I told him, I was like, we have, there's one thing that we need to consider if we're going to put this program together, and that's the fact that we have an art festival where we celebrate the authors, but that's only once a year. We have the public schools that have an opportunity to have these authors come in and talk about, not only their background, but also inspire and encourage and motivate them, to actually pursue either reading literature or even venturing into writing poetry or stories for that matter. And I'm very very pleased to say that yes, the city council agreed, and I was able to help run the our very first author recognition program, and it is still ongoing to this day. And but that's just it's not. I'm I didn't do this because I wanted this to be me put me in the spotlight. It's because it's everybody else. I'm just the writer. I can put so far and so much together. But yes, that's been some of the main driving pivotal factors right there. And then, needless to say, at that point, a few years down the road, I decided I wanted to really, really take a bigger picture and look at everything, just to kind of plan the road ahead between now and retirement, whenever that happens. And so that's what I decided, that if I was going to put the story together properly, that I was going to need to get myself a proper education. So that's when I decided to have my equivalent of the midlife crisis. So instead of buying the sports car and getting the 20-year-old secretary, I went back to college, and I went to Full Sail, and and it was one of the most amazing experiences I can ever have asked for. And ironically enough, one of the main classes that helped on kind of kickstarting the series into the point that it is now was one called Developing New Worlds. And it was run by a gentleman named Tom Lucas, who's another fellow author. And, again, this is one of the ironies of the way that life works sometimes. Going into Full Sail, I was completely unaware at the time, but for the professors that I would end up being taught from, I actually owned their books and actually have followed them on Amazon prior to me enrolling or attending. So understandably, I was coming into the class the complete and total fanboy with the eagerness to learn. So it was the best of both worlds. And in Mr. Lucas's case, he actually had put together this pamphlet, and it was the epic world builder. And it it was basically just a worksheet. You had to fill in the blanks, but it was supposed to help you in how to develop your story. And so, you know, what's the name of the world? What are the seasons? What does it look like? What type of society do they have? Do they believe in currency? Is there a religion? What type of religious beliefs do they have? What is their philosophy? And I just sat there, filled it all out, and he's like, something tells me that you might have done this before. And I'm like, well, um, not wanting to tell my age, but I grew up in the satanic panic of the '80s, and I used to play Dungeons and Dragons. And he's like, yeah, I could tell. Yeah, do you still play? And I'm like, not too much these days. But I know how to write a campaign. And he's like, oh, good. Are you working on anything else outside of campaigns? And I'm like, well, yeah, homework and whatever I have to do next week for this class. And that's about it. And he was like, oh, well, that's good. We'll hold on to this. It could be useful later. And those words never rang out so true, because lo and behold, that's what helped the inspiration for one of the companion books in the series, which is my Traveler's Guide to Basidia. And that's literally the entire world of Graham HAUTECLERE, but written up as a travel guide. So you have even your own little insurance papers, so that then you know that they're not going to be responsible for anything that happens to you during the course of the trip, and currency exchange, and even its own promotional souvenir catalog. So it's things like that have helped on so many levels, though, and just the simple fact that I've been very fortunate enough to be able to work with Michelle through some of my other projects. That I'm very, very thankful that she was equally excited and was able to see the potential for this series, because my personal email from her starts off with, I've never read fantasy before.
It's true. It's true. I was totally not a fan until I read your material. That's why I know everybody's going to love this. That's true. It's true.
Yeah. And I mean, and I'll admit, for myself, right off the bat, I was like, a book agent that has never read fantasy. They've never. Do they know Tolkien? Do they know Dragonlance? Okay, well,
I know
here we
them.
go.
I just don't visit them. Yeah, I know them. I just didn't want to go visit them.
No worries. But yes, lo and behold, though, she found the diamond in the rough, as they say, and I'm very, very, very pleased that to see that she's been equally excited to help bring this story to the audience and to the bigger picture. And I'm very, very, very happy to say that between my lessons from Full Sail and with the novels coming out, that as we speak right now, I'm actually converting this series into individual scripts that we're going to try to propose and send to Netflix and to the other studios. And we're going to see if there's anybody else that's going to see the story the way that it should be intended. And I know with Michelle's cheering and little magic touch and everything else, that this is definitely in the right hands, without a doubt. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to share a scene from the series, and this is actually still, believe it or not, this is 3 pages, and I am going to give a quick spoiler, but there's 2 scenes in particular during the course of writing the original series that had always been my proudest, and I want to do something different because if you see my name under YouTube, you're going to see the first scene in there already. And nobody knows until now what the second scene is that I'm proud of. And I want to share it with you, but I'm going to give you 2 spoilers in the process. So, for starters, this particular piece is one of the reasons why I had visit number 68, the school psychologist. And at this point in the course of the story, what I had done was I actually started to look at later generations in terms of tactics, strategy, reactions, things like that. And so, instead of seeing Civil War tactics or even elements of the First World War like you would have seen in the first 2 stories, now we're coming into the Vietnam era. And so, one of the things I was intentionally playing around with was something that my one friend Bob had mentioned many years ago, and that was the fact that you can't always tell which one was the enemy, because he had spent some time in Hanoi and had spent quite a few number of tour of duties over there and such. And outside of talking about the blurring between friend and foe, he would oftentimes say, "We're not always the smartest animals on the planet." And I intentionally fell in love with that quote, even though it was coming from a context that troubled him. I knew that I was able to work with it. And so that's exactly what I did. And so this is actually an epic, brutal death of one of the villains. And this particular villain is known as Necomsile. And the way that I've envisioned him is this is Genghis Khan, but instead of being in charge of the cavalry, he's in charge of the Navy for the bad guys. And he's a 600-pound warrior that just is more gluttonous than ever. And even though he's willing to for his cause and everything else, he also likes to gorge on the spoils of war, and he takes full advantage of it. And so at this point, what happened is that he decided to actually take the battle to the home front. And so Philip was actually able to witness firsthand, what the real full brutality of an invasion was like. And even though in the first 2 stories he'd always worked off of a defensive move, because of the fact that now it's coming to the home front, the reality of it snaps him, and so he decides to do something that he had never done before. And so that's where we come into it. So let me go ahead and share. So as they say, prepare for an epic scene, but spoilers ahead. Philip was moving among the shadows, climbing an elm tree that towered over a drunken Necomsile. The blade of Graham HAUTECLERE shimmered many hues as the firelight reflected from it. Philip moved over a few inches and poised the sword vertical, waiting for the moment to arise. He was suspended in the air, using the claws of the armor for support. 12 feet below him, Necomsile was pouring another flask of wine into a skin pouch for easier drinking. Even from above, his body odor was noticeable, causing Philip to bite his tongue or otherwise give his position away. The time grew closer as the intoxication began taking effect. Necomsile lay against the tree, drinking his victory toast, loving the spoils of war. Around him were his forces all bunked down for the night. Tomorrow they would march to the castle and take Philip's son in Tarakon's name. He lifted the pouch to drain the wine down his throat and belched loudly. With his head raised, he gazed into the night sky, smiling as he heard the cries of the refugees in the distance. A strange growing shaft of light caught his attention. Forcing his vision to focus, he started to release a yelp at the figure above him. Long brown hair hung above the glowing shaft, illuminated by the fires, were a pair of vengeful eyes glaring into Neckham style. The time of vengeance was upon him. Philip released his grip and allowed gravity to force him down. The blade entered into the cavernous gap of Neckham style's still open mouth until there came a dull thud. Landing on the corpse, Philip tugged at the sword with all of his might. The blade had pierced the leader's skull and had embedded itself into the tree. After wrestling for what seemed an eternity, Graham HAUTECLERE returned to its owner. Around him, the forces engaged the enemy, setting fire to the tents and locking soldiers into them. One man tied a soldier to the ground and sat with sadistic curiosity, holding a torch to the vulnerable limbs, watching the skin redden and blister as the man screamed for mercy. You didn't show any to my family when they cried for the same. Let's see how you like this, the refugee said coldly as he doused the flames. Removing 2 jars from his pockets, the man unscrewed one and poured honey all over the serious burns of the soldier, causing a sickly sweet smell to rise around them. Philip stood silent, waiting to see what was to be the man's fate, while the refugee smiled like a child who was just given a pastry. The second jar was opened, and a black substance was poured over the honey-covered burns, causing the soldier to scream hoarsely. Philip looked closer and looked down, fighting emotions the best he could, as he discovered the black mass were thousands of ants greedily eating at the man's wounds. In the name of mercy, kill me, I beg you, the soldier implored to Philip. Did you show any of this to the man's family? He asked coldly. The soldier, seeing his fate, remained silent as the insects moved about his body. In a fleeting second, Philip drove his sword into the soldier's chest, giving him the release. The first group of forces were massacred where they camped. Climbing atop a shadow steed, Philip flew back to the castle, waiting for the second wave. Below them, Neckham style lay with his bloody maw open, staring with glazed, unmoving eyes at the bodies of his fallen men.
I just realized I was muted. So
Oh,
anybody who wants to know how that plays out, they're going to have to go get the book next week, next Friday, everybody. That will be widely available, and you can find the links everywhere. You'll see it on the KMP page, you'll see it on William's page, but it will be widely available. So William, again, thank you and congratulations, but I want to open the floor up to questions and see if anybody has any kind of questions. I did see one in the chat, and it looks like Kate has a question. Kate, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask him.
Hi guys, can you hear me? I'm bad at this. Okay.
yeah.
Is it going to be audiobook? I'm just old fashioned. I want to hold a book. Is that an option?
It's the old-fashioned book.
Good.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Audio, like, oh, I'm bad at this. I'm sorry. I have to be honest. Even, you know, typically listening to someone else read a story is, whoa, there's weird stuff happening here.
Oops.
Oh, you got muted. You unmute yourself, Kate. You went. You
Yeah,
must have.
there you
There
go.
you go.
Some other voice, like a news station came on. I'm sorry. I was just going to mention that I had, like you mentioned, Tolkien and so on and so forth. I've had to read and reread, and that's not my standard, because that's not my typical genre, but I get so into it, it just takes me a long time. But even you just reading that scene, now, was it a scene from the book or from a potential script was going to be my question, because it read beautifully.
Thank you. Believe it or not, that was from the original story from when you and I were in 11th grade. The rest of the book, though, is where you see the older version of me pick up where I originally had left off. But still fun to revisit all the old stuff. And I see my Aunt Debbie. Hi, Aunt Debbie.
Hi, dear. Sorry my video is not on, but you know what's happening in my house right now, so it's a little crazy here. Anyway, I just loved hearing you read the passage yourself because you have the feeling behind. What am I trying to say? In other words, you have the meaning and the feeling that you want to convey in the reading. An actor would just read it with emotion, but you have the feeling behind it and what you want to convey. That's the word I want.
Well, thank you.
So it was excellent. It was very excellent, and I do want to know what happens. And I feel bad for that poor soldier. I mean, my God, to have those ants all over him. Oh. Thank you for the mercy.
No problem. So, but no, I do, and
I'm in the middle of.
But I also
what, honey?
Oh, I was gonna say, but I do also want to acknowledge you as well too, because, for my family, and for those that you don't know, my Aunt Debbie actually is an actress out in California.
Nice.
And she was on Unsolved Mysteries, and soon to be moving to Atlanta. Yep. So, but yeah, she was on Unsolved Mysteries. She was in a Limp Bizkit video. She even did the voiceover for the Ultraman movies. And as I started coming into writing, she always said that if anything ever happens, she would gladly star in one of my films. And she even was one of the first people to buy me Sid Field's book on screenplay writing and things like that. So, you can see obviously it's helped to pay off, Aunt Debbie. So thank you.
Excellent. Yes, Michelle, I'm right in the middle of putting wallpaper border up on my house right now because I'm selling it. It gets listed Thursday.
Oh.
So I look like a disaster, and my house is a disaster, so my video's not on right now.
No worries, no worries. We're just glad you joined us.
Of course, I would not miss this. I'm glad I could make it.
Yeah, thank you for that. So if nobody else has any questions for William, because I don't see any more in the chat, and I don't see any on Facebook, I'm looking. Feel free, you can still drop questions later, and I will make sure that William responds to you. But as we say in show business, that's a wrap. We're gonna close out here. So again, William Brower, congratulations to you. I'm so excited for this series to release book by book. So the first book will be available this coming Friday. So make sure you check back on the KMP page or check with William if you're friends or family and get that link from him. But everybody enjoy what's left of your weekend. And again, William, congratulations. We are so excited for you.
Congratulations,
Thank you
William.
so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
I love you.
Congratulations.
I love you too.
All right, take care. Bye.